Hey!
Hey,
Oh, good morning, everybody. How the heck are you guys doing?
doing great.
Doing
Doing good.
amazing.
Awesome. Awesome.
Happy to be
Marcus,
here.
how the heck are you, buddy?
Doing awesome, Chris. Thanks for having me on this morning, and excited to talk some Terraform and Fabric.
Oh, this
Yeah,
should
it'll
be
be
good.
interesting. Had a few
Same
comments to
thing.
Chris earlier on, so I'll bring them up later. But got tons of questions for you. I know nothing about Terraform, so I'm your target audience.
Yes.
Same thing. I
Oh,
got my Terraform Fabric here. I'm wearing all my earthbending stuff so that if we're talking Avatar, right?
right, right, right. I believe that's a cartoon, right?
It is, but they terraform. Earthbending's a thing. It's very much a thing.
Hmm.
So
Right.
And
that's
I
what
was
we're
thinking of the Alien movies, terraforming to make.
that too.
So do we dig into where the word comes from and how they ended up naming this Terraform? Is that what I'm hearing?
Hang on, this is not PBS. Let's not even go there, right?
Sorry, I didn't come with a origin of the word background in my
Or
my little
just why the
presentation
company
today.
chose it. Maybe they are fans of one of these things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's, it's the
Data.
Data Brady Bunch is exactly right.
Yeah, we need Mark on too to fill all the squares.
Yeah, yeah, Mark, where the heck are you, buddy? Um, but it's good to see everyone. Christina, you had some insightful words for us before we started. Do you want to relay those to the group?
Yes. Preface your questions with a Q and don't repeat questions. Like don't spam the chat. We have moderators and they are empowered to kick you out if you do spam the chat, but we haven't had that problem. Everybody's been amazing, so let's just keep that spirit going.
A freaking men. All right. Well, we've got a lot to get into today, and we're going to be diving right into it. I know we've got a hard stop by 8:30 this morning, but before we dive in, I just want to say it's great to see everyone. Jack, Mark, Jason, Aaron, or Aaron. Andrew, Databard, good to see everybody. Andy Leonard is here, the man, the myth, the legend. He does Data Engineering Friday sessions. So Andy, post in chat when your session is today. I know it's like in a couple hours, but he goes really in depth. So do check that out. And apparently, Jared, you're an earthbender now. Is that a
Yep.
good thing?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I was wondering the same thing, so it shows where we're at, Chris. But
You have no idea how many kids shows I watch these days.
So, I'm 50, right? Like I am about as out of it as you could get, right? Like I'm 50 years old. I spend all my time in data. What do we say all the time? Best day ever, right? Hashtag BDE. Well, apparently, for the kids these days, that means something else. Don't search for that on your work laptop.
You got me curious now. So
yeah, you'll notice
get
that
on
that's
my
come
phone.
off of the logos and the apparels if you're looking out on the stores. So, but,
Fair.
yeah. All right, Marcus. You're gonna be talking about Terraform. I think I saw a question come through. Oh wait. Oh, example question.
It was
That's fantastic.
It was a trick.
Yeah, I got way too deep into that before I read the whole thing, so that was fantastic. All right, Marcus, let's start. What the heck is Terraform? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to kind of set the stage with we're into year 2 of Fabric, the product as a whole. And in year 1, it seemed that Microsoft had a very big focus on the citizen developer, the low code, no code experience in Fabric. And that was their emphasis for year 1, especially at FabCon and the types of announcements that came out last year. In this year, in year 2, it was very clear the direction of the product was to close the gaps for the professional developer and to emphasize automation, code first experiences, and a lot of those features this year at FabCon emphasized that approach, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the announcements at FabCon this year was the support for Terraform, which is a infrastructure as code language, the leading infrastructure as code language in my understanding. And so what this now allows you to do with your Fabric infrastructure is fully support this and automate this through code. And so
hang on one second here, Marcus.
yeah, go ahead.
I don't speak the ways of like deep speak cloud developer. What do you mean by infrastructure as code?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what that means is you can control all of your infrastructure objects, your Fabric items. So all the way from your capacity to your workspaces to all of your individual Fabric items that you may want to deploy in an environment. And you can now control that all through code instead of using the infamous term click ops in terms of clicking your way through the interface to create all of those things. I can now use my CI/CD pipelines. I can use the command line interface. I can use a number of different methods to deploy that code and have that be a part of my automation process now with my infrastructure.
So that's fantastic. What does that mean? What's the business result, or what's the activity that allows me to do? That's like, why should I care about that?
Yeah, so a couple different reasons. One, your organization may have, certain guidelines or requirements that, from a security standpoint, require you to use an infrastructure as code approach for managing your Fabric environment or other environments in your data space in your organization. So that may be one reason why you want to lean towards this approach. The other reason, or another reason, is to avoid inconsistencies. So maybe you want to have a standard way that you want your Fabric workspaces to be deployed every time you create a new workspace. Meaning you want the same properties or settings filled in a certain way. You want it attached to a certain capacity, and you don't want to have the users necessarily have to click their way through that setup or a user do that. So you may lean towards an infrastructure as code approach to have that be very consistent every time you spin up a new workspace or a new environment within Fabric. The third reason is simply to avoid, as I mentioned earlier, the click ops. So save yourself some clicks and do it via code, and automating that approach would be another reason why you might lean towards Terraform or another infrastructure as code option, which I got a short presentation here that I'll go through before we go through the demo. But it kind of lays out.
It's almost like you know what you're talking about.
At least seem that way. So, well, especially for those that are new to the concept, I wanted to just give a few more, supporting pieces before we dive straight into the demo and start looking at the different code components here of Terraform and how it can integrate into Fabric. So I'm going to find there we go. So just a quick intro. Just click through way too fast. Sorry about that.
While you're getting there, I want to say a big shout out to all of those of you who are joining us from TikTok. This is our first TikTok live stream. So we're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, we're on X, and we are on TikTok now. So, hey, TikTok people.
I feel like I should be dancing.
Yeah, can we all
All the things.
Yeah, like apparently when you're on TikTok, you get to do choreographed dances. So I don't exactly know how that happens, but everyone start. Sorry, Marcus.
It's all good. I didn't come with a prepared dance, but we can start working that in.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
All right. I'll redirect us back here. So infrastructure as code. Just again, a little introduction. I know we talked about it, but what does it do? It uses a DevOps methodology and versioning with descriptive language to define and deploy infrastructure. And again, we just kind of talked about the why, some of the reasons why you would want to do this. Another reason I have listed here that I didn't mention before is in a disaster recovery scenario. So you may have a situation where something gets completely wiped out. And having your infrastructure based in code allows you to quickly deploy that back out and have your recovery time be much less than if you had to go through the UI and spin all of that back up. How could you do this? I listed a few options. You could do Azure DevOps pipelines to automate that. You could use GitHub Actions. You could use another CI/CD preference that you have there. And then the different types, just to kind of set this, give some different flavors here. So there are vendor-specific infrastructure as code options. So I have a couple of those listed there. So like with Azure or Microsoft specifically, you can do ARM templates. You can do Bicep for your Azure resources as examples, but those are vendor-specific options. And then on the AWS side, like CloudFormation is another flavor of that only applies to AWS. And then if we take a step back, Terraform is nice because it's vendor agnostic. So it supports multiple vendor options such as AWS and Azure or Microsoft. And the cool part about this in my mind is like with Power BI, Microsoft never gave us an infrastructure as code option. As long as Power BI had been out. So for you to do that, you had to do somewhat of a custom scripting through the API and what was supported there. But I just feel like this is a really big delivery by Microsoft and the Fabric product team to give us this Terraform support as an option here for infrastructure as code.
Yeah. Hey, Marcus, we got some good questions already starting to stream in. Jake wants to know, can you deploy just capacity workspace permissions without any Fabric items?
You can. And I'm going to, in the demo here coming up, I'm going to show some of the different things you can do with Terraform. But yes, you can pick and choose what pieces you would want to include in that Terraform template that you may use, that Terraform main script. So yes, you certainly could do that, Jake.
Awesome. And then he's got a follow-up question. Can you convert an existing tenant automatically to a Terraform configuration? Can you extract it and say, this is the Terraform config of this?
As far as I know, that's a little bit more difficult to do. Mm-hmm. Ideally, you want to start with this at the beginning or net new type approach. Sure. I believe there's, it's possible, but you're probably going to spend a lot more time, trying to do it off existing infrastructure as opposed to, new or net new items.
Okay, so this is more for greenfield development, not brownfield. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. You'd think there'd be a way to get there, though, because especially with your items in the workspaces and stuff like that, but it may be worth looking into more. I do like that question because I already have things put into place and thinking, like you said, about disaster recovery, faster recovery from you gave somebody too much permission and they deleted everything,
But you could potentially, and I was just thinking about this, you could potentially say, here is my list of assets that I want every environment to have, that I have Terraform configured to do. And then you could parcel that out and do an use the admin APIs to evaluate each environment and then figure out which ones needed to have those 10 assets in, right? And so some environments you'd run 7 against, and others you'd run 2, and some you'd build 10. You could do something like that with some more advanced scripting, right, Marcus?
Yeah, and that's a great segue into this next slide, because while Terraform is one of the options, as Terraform's one of these options to manage your infrastructure, you can also do so through simply scripting out via the REST APIs. And so that would be potentially another option for that scenario that we just talked about, where you already have an existing infrastructure and you want to handle that via the APIs here. Keep in mind that Terraform is based on top of a provider's set of APIs. So when kind of tracking additional functionality with Terraform and Fabric, you'll want to keep in mind it's only going to be as far along as what the APIs have been. The support for the Fabric APIs from Microsoft. So Terraform support will follow that. And I actually asked about that at FabCon, and they did say, you can expect within a couple of weeks after an API release by Microsoft that would then be available through the Terraform provider.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned that some of the advances that they made and some of the direction that they have was geared because they wanted to work more with Terraform, right? Or things of it. Like things are not considered GA until they have the APIs around it. And I think part of this coming in is where the command line interface came up. So Terraform could do things better throughout the command line interface.
I agree, and that's going to be our demo today. I don't have any slick CI/CD pipelines deploying this, but we will be using the command line to run some commands and hopefully see if the demo gods cooperate. Hopefully see some created artifacts in a Fabric environment.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, are we going to a demo here? Oh wait, a second.
Just one last for the people on the live stream today. If you want to get started with this, and this is another point I want to shout out to Microsoft with Fabric, is they have been starting to release a number of helpful Git repos and quick start examples around a number of different topics, not just Terraform. But these are a couple of links that you can use to get started. And there's some quick start projects that you can use. One of them shows you how to spin up a Fabric capacity and tie it to a workspace. Another one talks about deploying some Fabric items and attaching that to a workspace. So just a lot of great resources out there where even if you're unfamiliar or don't have a lot of experience, you can quickly get a simpler example stood up and work from that.
So before we fully jump into the demo, got a couple other background questions. Number one, is there a cost to being able to use Terraform?
So if there's two options with Terraform, one is the command line interface, and that is completely free.
Okay.
So if you script through the command line, there's no cost. You can also use Terraform Cloud. So you can purchase a license and use Terraform's interface to orchestrate and do your deployments via that licensed account.
Okay.
I don't have much experience with the licensed account or the cloud, experience, but I assume you get a little bit more. Assume you get more features there, and probably requires less coding on that front to get your deployments going, which
Okay.
is why the additional cost would be a part of that. But you do
Yeah.
have those two different options there.
Yeah, because it was like one of these times that I read a headline and didn't read the article, and I saw something about Terraform, starting to charge or whatever. So I was really kind of interested in that. And then, so if you're scripted it out, then you keep that in within like your GitHub or your Git repository, right? And then you have a way of kicking that off automatically. So you script out what you want for Terraform, and then you automatically kick it off, say through still an Azure DevOps pipeline or something for your release. Would that be the overall concept?
Correct. So you'd have an Azure DevOps pipeline, a GitHub action, another CI/CD option of your choice, and ideally you'd have that run before your code deployments. And so you could have your infrastructure either run on a daily basis to keep that intact, make sure that those states of your infrastructure are what you want them to be, and then that can be followed by specific code deployments in those Fabric items, all a part of the same process, or have that divided up between multiple pipelines, depending on how you want to approach that.
Gotcha. Okay, because that seems to work now. Back to like the greenfield versus brownfield. So if I have things already kind of deployed, but now I'm going to start onboarding other departments, right? And you want that department set up the same way, right? That may be a good time to jump into Terraform, and you could automate or standardize how you're bringing on other departments within your company. But if you've already rolled out, say, your central BI team solution, then you'd have to work towards bringing that in. But it may be an opportunity for that within what was said as the brownfield. I like it.
I could even see this being used with like FUAM, right? Like if you're in a consulting role, maybe you're not able to do this across an organization, and you have like a standardized set of reports that you deliver to a client. You could kind of build something like this out and have your admin monitoring workspace.
Oh, you think to help automate installing FUAM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you have other artifacts on top of FUAM, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Good point. Or in combination, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we got a good question from Jake here. He wanted to know the Terraform registry is not loading for him right now. He remembers last time he was looking at semantic model, there was a limitation on PBIP formats. Thinking only legacy formats were. Are there any limits around the semantic model and PBIP in Terraform, Marcus, that you're aware of?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the documentation again to see exactly what formats or what limitations there are. Again, it's all going to be based on what is available in the API.
Yeah.
And then cross-referencing that with the documentation on the Terraform provider to see what options are available there.
Are you telling me you don't keep track of every limitation of every feature inside of Microsoft Fabric? Like you don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of that? That seems crazy.
Unlike I got a poster up on my wall here.
I was just gonna say I need to buy a third monitor and just have that be a continuous scroll so I can reference that at all times.
I like the continuous scroll part.
Well, it'd have to be a really big monitor too. All right. Okay. Now we've done enough talking. Did you say you had a demo?
I do. One last slide, just as a reference here, before we get to that. A couple of key commands that I'm going to be going through in the demo. So after doing all of your install, downloading, installing Terraform provider, making sure that you're authenticated to the tenant and subscription that you want to be working in via CLI authentication or service principal authentication. There's a number of different options, again, that you can check out on the documentation for authentication. I'm going to be using just CLI interactive MFA authentication for today. But the first thing you're going to do is you have your repository and you're going to run a Terraform init or initialize command. And what this is going to do is this is going to install all the providers that you have in your Terraform project. So you may have the Fabric provider, you may have the Azure Resource Manager or RM provider, you may have the Azure Read, or I think it's AD provider, even though it's called Entra now, the provider's still AD, as an example. And then from there, a couple of different options here is you can run a Terraform plan. So you can have Terraform check, is this going to deploy correctly? And it will tell you everything that's either going to be added, changed, or deleted in that plan. And you can kind of run through the code and say, yeah, that looks correct, or no, why am I doing this? And you can make adjustments before you actually do your deployment. And then you can take that saved plan in the third command there and run a Terraform apply plan, and it will run that executed plan that it generated in the previous step. And then for testing purposes, this part's really cool as well. The last part is you can run a Terraform destroy. And what that will do is that will tear down everything that you just deployed in your project. So let's say you're doing a proof of concept, or you're trying this out and you're not really sure how it's going to go, and you may not want to keep the resources after you're done. Well, you can quickly tear that down via the destroy command and start net new or make changes for your next deployment. So really helpful when testing locally, getting this started off the ground. So anyway, that's going to be a preview of what's to come here in the demo.
Actually, Marcus, I want to call out that Terraform destroy is one of the ways you can avoid potentially lots of cost as you're developing this. Prior to that being a thing, Terraform.destroy, before that was a thing, you had to tear things down individually and whatnot. I had someone who terraformed up a whole bunch of assets, and they didn't programmatically destroy them after the fact, and they let them run, and it cost me something like 20 grand in Azure spend because they didn't have that little bit of command at the end. So this is very important to, if you're going to program the creation of things, to be able to programmatically destroy those things as well. So.
And I'm assuming, so then to be clear, the Terraform destroy command is exclusive. It only destroys items that are defined in Terraform. There isn't like a keyword that says like /all and then suddenly everything explodes, right?
That's correct. It's going to be what's defined in the state of what you either create in that Terraform plan command or the Terraform apply, which is very similar, except for the fact that it doesn't actually generate that TF plan file that actually keeps the state of your plan. But when you run Terraform apply, it's going to lock the state of what artifacts are in that Terraform object, and it will not go outside, it will not add, it will not change in that state until you wipe that out and create a new state of the project, so to speak.
I wanted to make sure of that, because like Terraform destroy just sounds very like intimidating. Just destroyed.
Yeah, luckily there's not an argument you can attach on the end that says like Terraform destroy my entire Fabric tenant. That would not be ideal. Get to some demo here. All right. So I have my VS Code, and I'm going to do my best to use the zoom in feature here just to help with. So we're going to be working out of this Terraform Fabric resources here. And what we have are a couple of key files that you're going to want to start with. One is your providers. So this is going to tell Terraform, okay, these are the providers that I'm going to be using in my project. So you'll have to specify things like, I'm going to use the Fabric provider, I'm going to use the Azure RM provider, et cetera, et cetera. Next, you're going to have your variables. So these are going to be things that you want to change and you know, control at runtime, adjust, keep dynamic in your definition of your Terraform project. Within your variables, that's going to be your definition, and then you're going to also have a Terraform.tf vars, and that's where you're actually going to plug in the variable values that you want to use in your deployment. So again, that can be totally customizable. That's totally up to the developer on what you want to have included in those files. Then we have an outputs file. So the outputs file is going to be, as Terraform is executing, what do you want to have the output be? What do you want to verify during that Terraform deployment or execution? So you can customize that outputs file to say, I'm generating this Fabric workspace. I now want to see maybe the GUID of that workspace, or I want to see that the workspace, I want to have the workspace name be outputted after it's been deployed. Things like that are things you can customize in the outputs file. And then finally, you have your main.tf, and this is going to be where the bulk of your code is going to go. And this is going to be your definition of that Terraform deploy. So this is going to be where you specify, I want to have 4 workspaces created, or I want to have 1 workspace, and I want to have a lakehouse, a warehouse, and a notebook be a part of that. And then some additional things I have in here are, I do have a Fabric folder, and I do have an example where you can bring Fabric items or previous pieces of code for those items and have that definition be deployed as a part of Terraform. So kind of going back to that brownfield or even greenfield scenario, you can link previous code items or previous Fabric items you have deployed and have that be a part of your Terraform deployment as well. Okay. So in my providers here, and this can all be found on the Terraform support pages, you can see here that we're dealing with 1 provider in this, and this is Fabric. Since they went GA, they are out of the beta version, so we are in 1.1 in terms of that latest supported version there. And then in the provider block of code, lines 12 to 14 there, this is where you can specify your authentication method. So in this example, I'm using CLI or interactive or MFA authentication. But this would be where you could switch to use a service principal. And you could specify, you know, your tenant ID, your client ID, and your secret in this block. Obviously not hard coding that except for testing purposes, but you could use variables to propagate those values through. And if you're doing it through a pipeline deployment, this may be where in your code block you're referencing a key vault secret as an example to pass through those credentials.
Good thing I waited on my question because that was next.
All right. Variables, just as an example here, I have 2 variables in this. So I already have a predefined capacity. So I'm going to pass through that capacity name. And then for the overall app name, like my solution name, I'm going to pass through a name for that because that's going to be part of the dynamic naming convention that I'm going to use for like my workspaces and my objects that are a part of the solution.
Hey, Marcus.
Yeah.
Jake wanted to know, does this use Fabric capacity units?
That's actually a great question. I'm not sure that it would. because what you're doing is simply setting up the configuration of your Fabric artifacts or environments. So unless as a part of this, you're then executing like some code or running queries or, you know, kicking off a notebook after you're done with your Terraform deployment, I don't think compute units would be used in the actual infrastructure piece of it.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because like this, you're running this interface. When you're going to run it, you're going to run it off of your laptop, right? Then it's calling to do all of these things. If you're doing it like in an Azure pipeline, you got a build server or something that it's all running off of, I would imagine. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. Yeah.
We'll go with that. So no,
well, we'll say that we don't need any more capacity usage on
right.
our plate, or, you know, we'll just say that, you know, that's a freebie.
And obviously, like you said, the objects that you're deploying or the items that you're deploying, because we call them items now. If you're going to run some type of notebook, during that process, obviously that notebook's going to take up, capacity units, just like it would if you kicked it off manually.
That is spot on.
So then in my outputs file here, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but what I've done ahead of time is I've gone through and said, you know, these are all the outputs that I'm creating in this. Show me what those outputs are after the code has been executed. So again, you can specify as many outputs as you want or as few as you want, but this is totally customizable. And for debugging purposes, really helpful to see what Terraform actually executed in that outputs.tf.
Ooh, that is very helpful, especially if you're in the destroyer afterwards.
Unleash the destroyer.
The Kraken.
All right, and then finally we have the main.tf. And this again is going to be what is executed by Terraform to do the deployment. So this is where you're going to specify all the resource configurations that you want to have. So as an example here, what this demo is hopefully going to do for me is it's going to create an entire data environment. So it's going to create a landing workspace where I can land all my source data into. And then it's going to create a dev, a test, and a prod workspace environment with the appropriate lakehouse, warehouse items that I want to have for my data architecture. And so within here, this will include the capacity name reference that I have. It will include the landing workspace environment and all the notebooks or all the items that I want to include in that landing workspace. It can also even include the workspace permissions. So I can say every time I create a workspace, I want to have this security group as an admin role. And I want to have this security group as a member role, as an example, or however you'd want to configure that. And all of that can be automated as a part of this Terraform configuration.
Okay, hang on one second here. I want to go back over that because I think that might be like the biggest deal ever here. So one of the big challenges we've had since the dawn of Power BI was all of the chaos that was in our environments. Tens of thousands of workspaces, hundreds of thousands of objects, sharing and configurations all over the place, done willy-nilly. You're saying that if I, as an organization, embrace a Terraform-based deployment, not only am I able to set up common objects, but I'm able to set up common sharing and permissions for people in my organization to build and work with Fabric. Is that right?
That's exactly right. You have the power to automate all of that. And again, if we go back to that like workspace example, like in your organization, I want to have workspaces set up a standard way. and I want to make sure that, let's say, a service principal that I use for API work is always an admin on every workspace that's generated in my organization. Instead of me having to audit that and have to go back and, you know, kind of backfill that permission in, I can have that be a part of my standard workspace deployment with something like Terraform. So really, really helpful from that administration standpoint, consistency for those types of scenarios.
Well, and this actually gives us two paths that we could move forward for workspace creation, right? We could keep the current path where we then go back and potentially have to retrofit, or we kill that create workspace button and we stand up like a power app that calls the Terraform scripts to create it. So people are still enabled to create their own workspace, but they go down this defined happy path where by going down that path, not only do they get the workspace, but they get the Entra ID security groups, they get common sharing, they get like registration within Purview or whatever it is that you like want to spin up as part of that deployment. Am I on the right track here, Marcus?
Totally, Chris. I think you just generated some good thoughts and ideas for the people on the chat today. That sounds like an excellent path forward for still allowing that freedom, but having it be in a standardized way.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Sorry, Christina.
No, you're good.
You know, having a request process, right? So whether it's through Power Automate or something, right? But you also want that step of somebody request a new workspace, it gets approved, and then all of a sudden it kicks off this Terraform. Christina, were you going the same place?
I was going pretty similar. So down the same road, I have a lot of people who don't want to go to multiple places to do things. So if I kill that create workspace button and I do it in something like Power Apps or Power Automate, you could then embed that into an app in your tenant that everybody has access to, or only certain security groups do. And then it's still one place for them. It's still just one form they fill out, right? You could even put your other information you want people to consider in there. I mean, that sounds like basically you're making your own web page to spin up these artifacts the way you want.
Yeah.
But
and
I did have a question.
And we're killing this button by like setting the tenant settings that says who could actually create workspaces, right?
Yeah, and maybe you just change it to only be that service principal that can do it, and then they have to use the app to do it.
I would say always have at least one other human involved.
Yeah.
I don't trust all the bots yet.
Have a bot, but have a couple of humans that are.
Yes.
There's a need for break glass, right? So, hey, automation is not quite right. Some human with a brain go in and do something and unbotify whatever the bot's doing, right?
Security groups are your best friend, right?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Christina, you had a question?
I did. Yeah. So if I have an existing set of workspaces, can I overwrite with Terraform? Can I basically be like, actually, I need these security groups. I want access to look like this. Could I overwrite it on a workspace, or is this net new only?
So that's where it gets a little tricky, and you may have to use more of the API route for the existing to make changes because, again, Terraform captures the state. And so if you already have the state existing, it becomes a little bit more challenging to bring that back into and kind of recreate that through the Terraform. So it, again, and this was recommended to me by the developer at FabCon who did from Microsoft, who did the Terraform presentation, and his recommendation was, if at all possible, do it net new or do it with new things created in an existing environment, because it is challenging to capture an existing state and have that be a part of future Terraform deployments for those changes.
Makes total sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, back to your laptop. You're about to show us something else here, right?
Yes. Now we're gonna hopefully again, for the demo gods, we're gonna generate some stuff here. So I'm gonna expand my terminal here, and as mentioned in the presentation, the first command I'm going to run after everything is installed is, let's get over here, is that Terraform init command. So this is going to initialize my environment. It's going to install all the necessary provider executables. It's going to capture the state of what I have, and it's going to add some additional files that will be in like your git ignore file. You're not going to check these into your source control, but for local purposes, these will allow you to execute the Terraform. So Terraform init is going to be my first command here. And as it's running this, it's going to find those providers. And we can see that that executed correctly. And so if I head back over to the left-hand side in my files, we can see that it added this new .terraform.lock.hcl file. And so now my environment is locked in terms of having those providers installed. So for example, if you were to upgrade a version of your provider or add a new provider in your project, you'd want to run that Terraform init command again so that it captures that new state or new version of providers that you're executing. So just keep that in mind in terms of making changes to your Terraform. Next thing I'm going to run is a Terraform plan. I'm going to get this, actually go to my README, I'm just going to copy this command in here. And this is going to generate that plan that I was talking about. So it's going to basically double check, okay, is everything that I've scripted out going to work? And if it doesn't, it's going to throw back some messages saying like, hey, you have an error in this configuration, or you need to change the definition of this resource, this argument's not appropriate. And so what this does is generates a whole bunch of plan, but you can essentially back this all the way up and say, I'll zoom in on a piece of it here. It's going to show you like this warehouse is going to be created. This is going to be the name of the warehouse. It'll show you the properties that you have defined on it. Since the workspace, in this resource example, since the workspace is going to be created as well as a part of this, it's saying we're going to use that workspace ID, but we don't know what it is yet because I haven't created it. So it's going to say like, I'm going to pull that in during the deployment. And so it gives you this complete definition. These are all adds, or these are subtractions, or these are deletions. So it gives you that all in the plan. So really helpful, again, for debugging purposes, making sure that what I'm about to deploy is what I actually want to deploy. All right. So the last thing I'm going to run to do this is a Terraform apply. And I'm going to use that plan definition to do the deployment or the application. Keep in mind, you don't have to do Terraform apply plan.tf.plan or tf plan. You can actually just run Terraform apply, and it will do the same thing. But if you want to keep track of like states of that plan, or you want to have different versions of a plan, for example, you can generate different versions and then tell Terraform, I want to execute this version of the plan or this version of the plan. So that can be helpful if you do want to keep like that a part of your version control or your history to do that.
Yeah, it feels like that would be kind of like a release artifact, right? So I don't know that I'd keep it in my Git repository, but thinking through like if you're running it over and over again, you got an output from a release, and then however you keep that type of stuff. But that makes sense.
So did it work? Did it run?
I think he had a typo in the.
Oh,
I couldn't spell Terraform, so now we're gonna run.
Because we've been saying it so much, so it makes it hard to spell. So
Terraform.
well, the double R screwed me up. So I was Terraform, but not Terraform.
So while this
Okay,
is
so now
running,
this is gonna start spitting out a lot of output here.
Okay.
Jake had another good question. If it's here, if you want to bring that up, Chris.
All right. Will it always create the same plans, i.e., is it deterministic, or will it generate new plans if you have different objects in there?
It will generate new plans as long as you run that command. So let's say you made an adjustment to your Terraform project and you added in a new workspace or a new fabric item. You would then have to run Terraform, generate the plan .tf plan to update that plan file if that's how you're going to be executing the Terraform command. If you're just using Terraform apply, you can just keep rerunning that and it will update it. It will update it based on the changes you've made in your project.
But if I have the same objects and like Chris has the same objects and we both run a plan, that plan will be identical. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yep.
Okay.
Mean there's no AI that self-generates?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Terraform
Okay.
Copilot.
How do I integrate with Copilot? That's the next question.
If it doesn't integrate with Copilot, do we even need it? That's the real question, right? Like, if there's no Copilot integration, clearly it's not a.
Come on, just go full on agentic at this point. I just want to create a fabric environment. Go do it.
All right. I'm going to refresh my environment here. But assuming that the demo gods cooperated, we should have 4 workspaces, a landing, a dev test prod, and we should have some resources in each of those workspaces. So I'm going to expand my workspace menu here. Scroll down. And
Oh, what is that?
we should have a Terraform demo, dev, landing, prod, and test.
Nice.
So if I go into Terraform demo, dev,
This is a big moment, everyone.
we have a lake house and the different warehouse layers that I wanted to deploy. So we have that medallion architecture plus a platinum, because why not? We add another flavor in there. And we have all that configured for us. And then if I go to manage access, as it lags along here.
Wait for it.
Drum
big
roll.
Reveal.
Yep.
We can see that myself as the executor is an admin, and we can see that it added that security group as an admin. Once it, there we go, as it propagates through. And so you have those permissions tied to that workspace as well. So again, this with a couple lines of code in terms of those commands. Now, granted, you spend some time scripting out the resources that you want to have deployed, and that is some investment there. So tying this all together, is Terraform going to be the solution for every fabric environment or every deployment scenario? It's not, right? But it can be very useful, again, in those scenarios where you may have an infrastructure as code requirement in your organization. You want to standardize or make consistent the spinning up of new environments, whether that be workspaces or specific or item configurations in your organization. You want to standardize that. So a lot of different scenarios that this fits into. It's not going to be everyone because there is investment time in scripting all of that out.
But
But
once this stuff kind
really,
of gets scripted and it's available, and you take a little bit of time with this, I mean,
shut up and take my money.
this becomes just I think, well, it's not something that's, like you said, it's not something we're going to see in every place. It's something that is highly useful for lots of organizations. And I mean, Marcus, now you're a sharp guy, right? But how long did it take you to get up to speed on Terraform and get this up and running and working?
I have to be honest. It was a couple of hours, and I had no, like, a couple of months ago when this first got in preview. I want to say it was a couple months before FabCon where this started to trickle out in preview, and oh wow, Terraform supported for Fabric. That's new. I had a little bit of bicep experience in the Azure world before this. But I have to say, like, Terraform to me is a lot simpler than Bicep to get going with. And again, with those quick start guides I referenced in the presentation, you can take those sample repos, get started with those, build off of that, and assuming you have the correct authentication and permissions, honestly, within a couple of hours, you can have a prototype going. So
yeah. I mean, it sounds like, since you had some other background, that couple of hours, but maybe for others to even learn some of the concepts. So, but it's relatively short, right? And maybe we could try to. I know we got to drop here in just a minute. Can we get Jake's last question?
Sure.
Can you attach gateway connections with Terraform, or right? Marcus, I don't know if you have an answer to that, but
it's a great question. Again, I'd have to check the Terraform documentation to see exactly what is supported there. I know you for sure can do that with the API. So potentially, if that's even not supported by Terraform yet, what you could do is do kind of a hybrid scenario where you did Terraform for the resources, and then you used an API, scripted the API to bring the connections to the items that you just created.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like you mentioned earlier, right? If there's API support, then Terraform might get it lagging a little bit after the API goes GA.
Yeah.
You could probably even put it in a notebook and then have the Terraform kind of execute the notebook, and it could run the APIs that you need. I was thinking too, it would be cool with like notebook environments. I could see you putting those environments, or even like the variable libraries that are coming out. There's lots of things that would be good to just deploy as a base for workspace settings.
Yeah, I had that same thought too, because I was thinking, there are a number of things I could do with like notebook utils, but this takes the extra step back of creating the environment, whereas going the notebook approach, you still have to do click ops to get to that point.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, we are at time. So, Marcus, any parting words? What should people do if they want to get started with Terraform?
If you want to get started with Terraform, check out those quick start guides. We'll maybe leave some links in the video to do that, but those were referenced on the presentation. Microsoft has a lot of great documentation as well as Terraform around this, so give those a look, and happy coding.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. It's been fantastic to have you here. Have the best day ever. All right. Peace. Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.